Well, in this project, we're going to build this step stool here out of, in this particular case, pine. It's from a picture that I saw on the internet, although I modified it quite a bit to suit my purposes. But we've got about 17.5 inches high here, which is to create a seat to change your shoes on or stand on if you want. And then a hideaway step here that's equidistant across the top, which is about 8 3/4, I think. Anyway, they're dovetailed together. We've got a reinforcing bridge in the back here, a dowel between the two, and we're going to do it all with hand tools. So that's the project that we're going to do. Well, this is the dimensions of the piece that we're going to make, and hopefully you can pause the video and copy the dimensions down, although you can make it any particular size that you want. But I picked 17.5 inches high because that's a good chair height, because I plan on sitting on the top. It's 10 inches wide, that little reinforcing cross piece in the back, 1 3/4 inches. I got 2.5 inches for feet down there, and it's 17.5 inches long. So that's the main. The smaller piece is 15.5 inches by 8 inches by 8 3/4 high, which is half the distance from the top, so your steps are equal. What else do you need to know? This little piece down here is 1 3/4 inches. And when you watch the video, you'll see that I actually made a plywood template of this particular side, and then put a screw hole or pilot hole on the inside to make sure that I knew exactly where I wanted to be. In this particular one, it ended up being 1 inch, the center of that hole ended up being 1.5 inches back from the front, and 6.5 inches from the bottom, and it's a 3/4 inch hole, which is the size of the dowel that I used. So that's important, so that when it flops back, it disappears and it hits the back edge. So that's the dimensions, and we're going to make it with hand tools. Well, I've decided to build a step stool using hand tools, and I had this pine board sitting around, so I'm going to build it out of pine. So first thing we got to do is start to break it down into the sizes that we need. So I've got some ripping to do. I only need a small piece off of the other board. So I changed saws here. We got an Atkins rip that I think is fairly sharp. Well, I'm gluing up the 3 panels right now. These are the 10-inch wide ones that are used for the 2 sides and the top of the higher of the 2 steps. So they've got to be hand planed yet down to thickness, and so that I'm going to do once it's all glued up. Well, after I glued up the boards, now I'm flattening them, and then we'll take them down to the thickness that we want. This actually was 5/4 stock, which I don't need for the stool, but I'll probably leave it a little on the thick side. Just about flat now. Well, I'm just about done here dimensioning the stock. I've got the smoothing plane out here, and it's cutting a pretty good not bad for a left-handed guy. I'm doing this right-handed so you guys can see it. So what I settled for was 7/8 of an inch. So all the boards are 7/8 of an inch thick now. Well, pretty close to it. So now we're going to put the pattern on here and then lay out the dovetails. Well, I used the compass here to put an arbitrary arc on the bottom of the 2 sides. So this leaves me 2 1/4 inches on either side. The panels are 17.5 inches tall. So that's how high it's going to be. So we got to cut this out now with a coping saw. Now I need an 18th century spindle sander to clean that up. I'm using the file here to get it a little smoother. So I'm starting to work on the dovetails here. And what I'm going to do, there's a side. And here's another side. I'm going to dovetail the sides and the top together, which should make it nice and strong. So I do tails first, so this is going to be the tail board. We're going to have pins along there. So the first thing to do is I have my wheel marker here set to the thickness of the boards. They're all 3 are the same thickness. And it's just a matter of running the wheel along here to create the mark. So I've got them all marked now, and so the next thing to do is to lay out a dovetail pattern along here and then start to saw them out. Well, I laid out the dovetails now. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tails, and these are the pins to start with, and then the pins between it. So these are 1 3/8, and these are 3/8, and so that makes up the 10 inches that I've got here. I've got this sliding bevel, which I've had for years, set at 14 degrees. So that's a pretty good slope for dovetails. So we're about ready to saw them out. Well, I'm starting to chop out the dovetails now. So I just set in along the groove that we have from the marking gauge. And then I chop them out, half on one side and then half on the other. Not the fastest way, but it's the way I learned, and it works for me. Particularly with soft ones like this. Doesn't take much effort to chop through the pine. Well, I flipped the board over now, and I had set the chisel in on all of the base lines for these dovetails. And it's a matter of repeating the process. I do aim the chisel on a bit of an angle like this so that I like the two shoulders of the dovetails that kind of come together in a little hollow in the center, which is not uncommon when people teach hand chopped out dovetail. So now that I got the dovetails, there were tails chopped out on the top, I put the two sides on. I've marked it on the inside here, this being 1 and 1 and 2 and 2 over here, just like I would do a drawer, so that I know how to orient these after I put them back together. So the next thing to do is to mark on the tail boards, which are the sides, where they are. So we just go through here and mark them all the way through. So now we're ready. Here's the pins marked out on that one, and now I'm ready to saw them out. So now I'm going to saw out the pins here, and these lines which were scribed from the tails, that line is actually part of the pin. So we want to leave the line, so we want to always saw on the waist side of the line there, otherwise they'll be too loose. All right, now we're chopping out the pins. And we can use a much wider chisel here, because the tails are 1 3/8 inches. Well, we'll see if they fit together. Well, they're fair. I've done better, but for a stool, I guess it'll do. So they're slightly shallow here for some reason. They're tight over here, but we can plane that down. It's not off much, maybe, well, not even a fingernail's worth there. So the next thing we need to do, well, we could put a hole in the top here, handle, but we need to reinforce this across the back here. So we'll have a 1.5 or 2 inch piece come across here that will dovetail into these sides. So that's what's next.